They said she had it all: a perfect house, a brilliant career, a beautiful child. But when I opened that door, I saw something no grandmother should ever see. I wasn't supposed to be there. She didn't expect me. And what I found changed everything. My daughter called it discipline. I called it something else. The moment I stopped being silent. I didn't plan to stop by her house. I truly didn't. It was one of those cool, brittle mornings in October when the air smells like old leaves and something behind your ribs aches for no reason. I'd just come out of the Walgreens near Lyndale to pick up a refill on my blood pressure meds and a small tin of those mints I like, the ones no one ever stocks anymore. And then I found myself driving west, past the stretch of coffee shops where they all have French names no one can pronounce, past the soccer fields where I used to watch Victoria run so fast her ponytail whipped like a flag. I told myself I was just going for a drive. Maybe I'd stop at Trader Joe's and pick up their lemon curd. Maybe I'd call first. Maybe. But I didn't. I didn't call. I just kept going, like something in my hands had decided they were tired of waiting for permission. Victoria lives in one of those neighborhoods that has its own name, its own Facebook group, probably its own HOA bylaws about wind chimes. Big pale houses with wide lawns that never seem to have children on them. The kind of place where UPS trucks look like intruders. Her house was the same as always. Stucco and glass. A neat blue hydrangea bush by the front steps that looked too perfect to be real. No cars in the driveway. No signs of life. I rang the bell. Waited. Rang again. Nothing. I should have left. I know that. I told myself so. But then I saw it. The side gate, swung halfway open like someone forgot to latch it. The little concrete path led to the back patio where Victoria keeps those absurd Scandinavian deck chairs no one ever sits in. The kitchen had floor-to-ceiling windows, and I just wanted to peek. Maybe they were home and hadn't heard me. Maybe I could wave through the glass, like in the old days. But the glass didn't show a smiling daughter, or the smell of coffee, or a flurry of grandchildren running to hug me. It showed a basement light left on in broad daylight. That caught my eye first. That faint bluish glow through the lower window slit near the ground. Then the shape. A shadowed figure, unmoving. My heart caught. I walked closer. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear, but something in my stomach had gone cold. He was sitting there, my grandson. Alone. Strapped into a chair with some kind of harness I didn't recognize. Not medical, not safe, not right. His small hands were gripping the armrests, knuckles white. A bowl of something, maybe cereal, maybe not, sat on the floor like he was an animal. A camera, a literal security camera, was perched on a nearby shelf, pointed straight at him. I froze. My legs went soft, like the ground had turned into sponge cake under me. I couldn't believe it. No part of my brain could make the picture in front of me match the daughter I once braided hair for, who used to cry when a bee landed too close. I found the patio door unlocked. The air inside the house was cold and silent, like it had been holding its breath. I walked down the stairs, each one a tremor in my knees. The door to the basement creaked slightly, but the boy didn't turn. His eyes were locked ahead, not blinking. I called his name, gently, so gently. He flinched. When he finally looked at me, it took a second. Recognition came slow, as if I was just another figure in a long line of people who didn't mean comfort. "Grandma?" he whispered. "I'm here," I said. "It's okay. Let's get you out of this." The buckle was tight, too tight for a child. I had to fumble with the clasp, my fingers trembling so badly I nearly cried. When it finally popped free, he sagged forward, like a breath released. "She said I couldn't come out," he murmured. "She said I make too much noise." I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But I just took his hand, his little hand, clammy and shaking, and led him up the stairs and out the back door. We walked 2 houses down to the Carters. They weren't home, but they had one of those doorbell cameras. I looked right into it and said, "This is Margaret Lane from down the block. I need help. Call the police." Then I sat down on their porch swing and held that boy in my arms. He didn't say anything more, just leaned into me like he hadn't been held in weeks. I called 911. My voice didn't shake. I said my name. I gave the address. I told them what I saw, what I'd done, what I'd taken him from. Then we waited, listening to the far-off wail of sirens growing louder, louder still. He gripped my coat. I didn't let go. I don't know what I expected, but I knew this. I wasn't leaving him behind. Not again. The officers came fast. Lights flashing, tires crunching up the perfect stone driveway. It looked obscene, almost. That kind of noise in a neighborhood built for whispers. A female officer took the boy from my lap gently, wrapping him in a fleece blanket someone had in the back of their cruiser. He didn't cry, didn't speak, just blinked at her like his eyes weren't quite calibrated to real faces anymore. I told them everything. How I'd walked around back, what I saw, what I did. I expected more skepticism, maybe even a reprimand for letting myself in. But the older officer, gray at the temples and too tired to posture, just nodded as I talked. He looked like a man who'd seen enough bad things to recognize the real ones quickly. They asked if I was the child's legal guardian. I said no, that I was his grandmother. Maternal? The younger cop asked, flipping through a notebook like he was checking boxes at the DMV. I nodded. He grunted. That was all. Someone called for Child Protective Services. A social worker showed up not long after. A tall woman with dark eyes and too much coffee on her breath. She introduced herself as Miss Karen Doyle, flashing a badge clipped to her windbreaker. She asked if I'd ever seen anything like this before, if there were previous concerns. I said no, that I hadn't been inside the house in months, that my daughter and I weren't close. The ambulance arrived last. Paramedics checked the boy over. He was dehydrated, a little underweight, but otherwise okay, physically speaking. Emotionally, I didn't even know where to begin. One of the medics wrapped a wristband around his tiny arm and whispered something kind to him. He didn't flinch that time. I stood on the curb, hugging myself while the sun sank behind the roofline. I didn't cry. Not out of strength. I think I was just too stunned to remember how. Victoria arrived about 15 minutes later, speeding up in her white Tesla like she was late for brunch. She stepped out in a fitted blazer and those ridiculous boots she wears to pretend she's taller than she is. Her sunglasses stayed on until she saw the squad cars. Then they came off. Fast. "Mom," she said, voice tight and sharp. "What is this? What did you do?" She didn't look at her son. Not once. Walked right past the officers and straight up to me like I was the real emergency. "I found your child alone and restrained in the basement," I said. Careful, even. "I called the police." "You did what?" she hissed. "You broke into my house? You called the cops on me?" A CPS agent stepped in before I could answer. Introduced herself. Explained what was happening. The investigation. The child's temporary removal. Victoria turned red. Then white. Her mouth opened and shut like a fish pulled out of water. "This is a mistake," she said. "He has autism. The seat was to keep him safe. It's approved by his therapist." "Do you have documentation?" the caseworker asked. Yes, but not here, at my office. Look, my mother's unstable. She doesn't know what she saw. She shouldn't even be around him." She turned to the police as if that would magically erase everything. "He's sensitive," she said. "He throws things. Hurts himself. That chair keeps him calm. And she pointed at me, has no idea what she's talking about. She's never understood his condition." One of the officers cleared his throat, holding up his report book. "Ma'am, if you'd like to make a statement, we can take it formally. But I need you to remain calm." Victoria snapped something under her breath I couldn't quite hear. Then louder, You people don't understand. He's difficult. You think I don't love my own child? Her voice cracked just enough to make her sound human. But I saw it. The calculation in her eyes. She wasn't pleading. She was maneuvering. The social worker said the boy would be placed in temporary foster care until things could be reviewed. Not with me. Not yet. They needed to investigate. Legally, I had no claim. I wasn't listed on any documents as an emergency contact guardian. Nothing. My heart sank, but I didn't argue. I knew how this worked. The system didn't move on emotion. Victoria stood there, arms folded like she was giving a press conference. I want my lawyer, she said, and I want my mother off my property. Your mother's the one who reported this, the CPS worker replied. She's part of this case now. I didn't say anything else. I just walked away from her, slow and stiff, down the sidewalk to my car. My legs felt made of glass. The sun was almost gone, leaving a cold pink bruise across the sky. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time before I started the engine. The radio came on softly, some old Johnny Mathis song that felt like a joke. I turned it off. That night, back in my apartment, I called the only lawyer I knew who wouldn't laugh me off the phone. The answering machine picked up. I left a message anyway. Then I stood in my kitchen, holding onto the counter like it might float me somewhere safe. I'd just upended everything, broken into my daughter's house, called the police, started a CPS case, and lost my grandson all in the same breath. But you know what? I'd do it again. Every damn part of it. The call came back the next morning. I was halfway through my lukewarm oatmeal when the phone rang. Landline, of course. Cell phones make my ear itch. The voice on the other end was young, brisk, and too awake for 7:45 in the morning. Hi, this is Kristen Black, returning a message for Margaret Lane. I'm with Mid-North Legal Aid. You said this was urgent? I sat up straighter, wiped my hand on the dish towel. Yes, I said. It's about my grandson. CPS has him. His mother's, well, she's made a mess. I think he's in danger. Okay, she said quickly. I'm on a few dependency cases already. Can you come in today? 10 o'clock. I'll be there. I hadn't driven downtown in over a year. Too much traffic, too little patience. But I found a spot 2 blocks from the office and walked the rest of the way, my knees cursing every step. Kristen was waiting with a yellow folder already labeled with my name. She couldn't have been more than 30. Smart pantsuit, natural hair in a twist, a pen tucked behind her ear like she lived in motion. We talked for nearly an hour. I told her everything, from the patio door to the police to the cold dead look in Victoria's eyes. She nodded, asked questions, wrote fast. She's already retained counsel, Kristen said, flipping through a case database on her monitor. Filed an emergency motion to limit your contact. Cites mental decline and prior instability. I laughed, sharp and humorless. So now I'm senile too. Kristen didn't smile. We'll need a statement from your primary physician. Cognitive evaluation, if you're willing, done. And we'll file a petition to request monitored visitation. But unless we can prove harm or ongoing risk, the courts won't transfer custody without a full hearing. I felt something cold settle in my chest. He can't go back to her. You didn't see him? No, she said. But I believe you. 3 days later, I got an email from Kristen. We've been granted an interview with CPS. They're considering temporary kinship placement, pending review. But we'll need to build a stronger case, so we started digging. Turns out, Victoria had made quite a name for herself. CEO of a mid-sized PR agency downtown. Advocate for inclusive hiring practices. Plenty of smiling photos with foundation reps and glossy events, where she trotted out her son as a success story in progress. Said he was neurodiverse. Gifted. A challenge we embrace. But we couldn't find a single school that had him enrolled. No therapist listed on her insurance filings. No medical records we could get access to. Not without court orders. Kristen filed for subpoenas. We waited. Meanwhile, the boy, Jamie, was placed in a temporary foster home. Not ideal, but safe. I got 2 supervised visits a week at the county office. First one was a Tuesday afternoon. He was smaller than I remembered, thinner, like someone had slowly erased the edges of him. He didn't run to me. He just sat at the little plastic table, fidgeting with his watch. It was one of those children's smart models, all rubber and bright colors, with big buttons and GPS tracking. "Mommy said I can't talk about the chair," he whispered, "or the room." I didn't push. I just held out my hand. He blinked at it, then reached out and touched my pinky. That was enough. It was on the second visit that he showed me the button. "This one records," he said, barely audible. "Only for a little bit." "You record things?" "Only when I'm scared." I froze. "Do you still have any?" I asked. He nodded. "Maybe." Mommy never checks it. Kristen arranged for us to meet at her office after the next visit. I brought the watch. Her assistant downloaded everything. Audio clips with date stamps going back weeks. Most were static. A few caught background music. One had Victoria shouting something about the gala, and "Shut the hell up, Jamie," just for 5 minutes. And then there was the one. A clip no longer than 40 seconds. Victoria's voice, clear and close. "You're ruining everything again. Do you understand? Every time I try to fix this family, you screw it up. You're lucky I even let you eat upstairs. Now sit. And be quiet." Then a sound. Something slamming. Silence. Then Jamie's voice, small and flat. "I'm sorry, Mommy. I'll be quiet forever." I couldn't breathe. Kristen backed the file up 3 times, labeled it, encrypted it, submitted a copy to the CPS investigator that same day. No dramatics, just action. And still, Victoria came out swinging. That week, she held a press event for her agency, dismissed the rumors, claimed it was a family misunderstanding, implied I had health issues. I watched the clip online. Her hair was perfect. Her lies were smoother than marble. I closed the laptop. "She's not stopping," I told Kristen. "She's digging in." Kristen nodded. "Then so do we." The subpoena came through on a Thursday. Kristen called me that afternoon, her voice calm, but with a kind of tightness behind it, like she was holding something back until she had proof. "We got her financials," she said, "and her therapist list." I sat down slowly on the edge of my bed. The good quilt, the one with the little blue hexagons, slid to the floor, but I didn't pick it up. "And?" I asked. "She hasn't filed for any pediatric mental health services in over 2 years. Not since Jamie was in preschool. Any therapy? Nothing consistent. 1 intake visit. No follow-ups." That same night, Kristen forwarded me copies of the statements. Charitable deductions for donations to autism support groups that didn't exist, invoices from a therapy center in Oregon that had no record of Jamie, and a half-dozen siphons line items under home safety equipment that matched the harness I found in the basement. "She's been using him," Kristen said, "as a property. For tax benefits, PR, you name it." I wasn't surprised, but I still felt sick. Like I'd swallowed something spoiled and now it was pushing back up. A week later, we got a call from CPS. A formal hearing had been scheduled. Victoria was contesting everything. The audio, the placement, my visitation. She wanted it all dismissed. Claimed the audio was fabricated. Claimed I coached him. "She's leaning hard into the unstable grandma narrative," Kristen said. "We need to hit back with something stronger." We didn't have to wait long. The old babysitter, her name was Claire, a 20-something with a soft voice and wide, nervous eyes, called Kristen after reading about the case on a local parenting forum. She said she used to work for Victoria about 2 years ago, left suddenly. She wouldn't let me feed him lunch unless he'd been silent for an hour. Claire said during the affidavit. She said it was conditioning. She described the chair, the room, the door that locked from the outside. She said Jamie would cry sometimes for hours, and Victoria would play classical music over the intercom to drown it out. I didn't know who to call, she said. I was 20. I thought maybe she knew better. Her testimony cracked everything open. CPS reopened the original report as a high-risk case. The judge allowed an emergency request for an independent psychological evaluation, not for Jamie, but for Victoria. She tried to refuse. Her attorney called it invasive. The judge didn't blink. Kristen drove me to the courthouse the morning Victoria showed up for the evaluation. She wore gray, not the soft kind, but the slick steel kind that looks like a statement. No jewelry, no heels. Hair pulled back like a lawyer's assistant. It was performative. I recognized the strategy. She was trying to look smaller, meeker, like someone you'd feel sorry for in a newspaper article. But it didn't work. Not this time. 2 weeks later, the psychologist submitted her report. I wasn't allowed to read it, not all of it, but Kristen gave me the summary. Signs of narcissistic traits, severe emotional control issues, and a lack of empathy toward dependence, she said, scanning the page. I let the words hang there. Dependence. That's what Jamie had become to her. Not a son. A function. A cost-benefit analysis. They won't take him from her just for that, Kristen said carefully, but it builds the picture. Another hearing was scheduled. This one would determine temporary custody and visitation rights. The courtroom wasn't as dramatic as in the movies. Just tired carpet, beige walls, and that dry air that makes your throat itch when you talk too long. I sat behind Kristen, spine straight, palms flat. Victoria didn't look at me. When the judge asked for opening remarks, Victoria's lawyer went first. Called me interventionist, erratic, claimed I had overstepped, that the boy was sensitive, and that unconventional parenting didn't equal abuse. Kristen stood calmly and responded in that clipped, precise way that only lawyers can. Your Honor, we are not here to debate parenting styles. We are here to present evidence of emotional neglect, physical endangerment, and financial manipulation involving a minor. Then she played the recording. The courtroom went silent. Victoria didn't flinch. She'd heard it before. But the others, the bailiff, the court clerk, the judge, they shifted in their chairs. One of the CPS reps dropped their pen. Jamie's voice at the end, "I'll be quiet forever," landed like a slap. The judge asked for a 10-minute recess. When we returned, he was stiffer, more direct. He instructed CPS to begin an in-depth evaluation of Victoria's home. Ordered no unsupervised contact until the next hearing. Jamie would remain with his foster family for now. But the court was open to kinship care once documentation cleared. I should have felt victorious. But all I felt was hollowed out. Outside, the air smelled like wood smoke and rain. Kristen handed me a cup of coffee, and we stood by her car, watching Victoria storm toward her driver. She's going to spin this, I said. Use every inch of charm she has left. Kristen sipped her drink. Let her. We've got evidence. And momentum. But not Jamie, I said. Not yet, she replied. The courthouse looked different that morning. Or maybe it was me. Maybe it was the knowledge that something irreversible was about to happen, one way or another, that whatever the outcome, I wouldn't walk out the same. Kristen met me at the doors, already speaking in low tones into her Bluetooth. Her other hand held a thick binder with color-coded tabs. I knew better than to ask what was inside. She was always prepared, always calm. I leaned on her steadiness like I used to lean on the kitchen counter during my worst arthritis flares, with silent, exhausted gratitude. Inside, the gallery was fuller than before. Local press had caught wind of the story. A reporter with frizzy blonde hair was already scribbling in a notebook, even though nothing had started yet. On the other side of the aisle, Victoria sat flanked by two lawyers, Hair glossy, blazer pristine, not a crack in her armor. But her hands, I saw them, they trembled slightly when she picked up her water. Jamie wasn't there. The court didn't want him present. Good. He didn't need to witness this. The judge entered, a man with more frown lines than neck wrinkles, which is saying something. His eyes looked tired but focused. He greeted both sides with a brief nod and opened the hearing. Victoria's team went first. They tried everything: procedural objections, character assessments, even a so-called expert witness who claimed Jamie's emotional regulation had improved under Victoria's care. Kristen calmly dismantled it all. And then, the moment we'd been waiting for. Claire, the former babysitter, testified. She spoke clearly, if nervously. She described the harness, the rules, the silences, the fear in Jamie's eyes. She didn't cry. I did. Then came the medical consultant Kristen had brought in, a pediatric trauma specialist who reviewed Jamie's recent psychological evaluation. She used words like developmental suppression and learned helplessness. I hated those words, hated that they belonged to my grandson now. Then it was Kristen's turn to call me. The courtroom fell quiet. I stood slowly, knees popping, and made my way to the front. Swore in. Sat down. The microphone caught the little shake in my breath when I leaned forward. Kristen asked only a few questions at first. My relationship to Jamie, what I saw that day. I answered clearly, without dramatics, but then she paused and said, "Can you tell the court why you chose to report your own daughter?" I looked down at my hands. The veins stood out like roots. Then I looked at the judge. "Because I knew," I said quietly. "Because for months, I'd been making excuses. She's busy. She's under pressure. But the truth is, I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe my child could be cruel." My voice cracked. I let it. No one interrupted. "He's not a burden. He's a boy. A sweet, strange, brilliant boy who just needed to be held instead of managed. And I failed him too, by staying away. By letting her isolate us both." I looked over at Victoria. Her jaw was clenched, lips drawn so tight they were almost white. She didn't blink. "I'm not perfect," I said, "but I am willing. I'm willing to love him the way he deserves." Every single day, Kristen sat down. Silence held for a beat. Then Victoria's lawyer rose. "Mrs. Lane, would you agree that you were estranged from your daughter for the better part of 3 years?" "I would," I said. "And that you have no formal training in child psychology or special needs education?" "That's true." "So isn't it possible," he pressed, "that you misinterpreted what you saw?" "No," I said. "Not a chance." He tried again. Asked about my health. My memory. I stayed firm. Kristen objected twice. Sustained both times. Then the judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Lane, do you believe your daughter is a danger to your grandson?" I didn't hesitate. "I believe she doesn't see him as a person anymore. And that's dangerous." He nodded once, wrote something down. After closing arguments, the judge recessed for deliberation. 40 minutes that felt like 40 years. I sat with Kristen in the hallway, my hands wrapped around a cup of vending machine tea that tasted like old cardboard. Neither of us spoke much. When we were called back in, I don't know how I stood, but I did. The judge's voice was steady. "In light of the testimony, documented evidence, and psychological evaluations, the court is granting temporary kinship custody of Jamie Lane to his maternal grandmother, Margaret Lane. Full custody, to be reviewed pending further investigation. Visitation by the mother will be supervised and limited." I didn't breathe. Kristen touched my arm. Victoria stood. "This is outrageous. This is—" Her lawyer tugged her sleeve. She stopped. I turned away. I didn't need to see her perform. Not anymore. Outside, the sun was bright and unkind. Kristen walked me to my car, her phone already buzzing with reporters asking for comment. "I'll give you the full rundown later," she said. "But today, go home." "Rest?" I nodded. My body felt like wet sand in a paper bag. Too heavy to hold, too fragile to move. But inside, something unknotted. Slowly. Quietly. He was coming home. He arrived just after noon on a Tuesday. No grand procession, no music. Just a Black County car pulling up outside my small two-bedroom condo and a knock on the door that made me forget how to breathe. Jamie stood behind the social worker, clutching a small duffel bag in one hand and a plastic dinosaur in the other. He looked tired, but not scared. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, kneeling slowly, ignoring the way my knees screamed in protest. He didn't say anything, just looked at me, wide-eyed. Then, just like that, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around my neck. I held him so tight I thought my heart might split. The worker went over a stack of papers, placement terms, check-ins, follow-ups. I nodded through it all, my eyes never leaving Jamie's face. When the door closed behind her, the condo went still. Peaceful. Fragile, like the air after a storm. I showed him his room. Not fancy, but soft. The bed had a comforter with stars on it, the kind I wished I'd had the sense to buy him years ago. He touched the curtains, the bookshelf, the little wooden desk Kristen found secondhand and had delivered last week. "Is this all mine?" he whispered. "Yes," I said. "Everything here is for you, and you never have to earn it." He didn't answer, just sat on the bed and looked at the ceiling like he was waiting to wake up. That night, he didn't cry. He didn't speak much either. But when I sat beside him, reading from the same book I used to read to Victoria, Where the Wild Things Are, he leaned against my shoulder and stayed there until he fell asleep. The days that followed were quiet but full. We established routines. Pancakes on Saturdays. Morning walks to the end of the block and back. He started therapy, real therapy this time, and his new counselor said he was responding slowly but positively. "He's watching everything," she said, "learning to trust." We decorated a pumpkin together. His hands still shook a little when he used the carving tool, but I held his wrist steady. We planted some late autumn tulip bulbs in the narrow strip of dirt outside my window, even though I warned him they might not take. "Doesn't matter," he said. We tried. Thanksgiving came and went. No calls from Victoria. No letters. Kristen said she was working through appeals, but nothing urgent. The silence was its own kind of mercy. Then one morning, as I was folding laundry, Jamie came into the kitchen and held up his smart watch. The same one that had recorded everything. He looked nervous. "Can we delete them?" he asked. "The bad ones?" I knelt again, slower this time. "We can," I said, "but only if you want to. They helped us. They kept you safe." "I know," he said, "but I don't want to hear her anymore." So we sat at the table and pressed each file, one by one, into oblivion. When it was done, he put the watch in the drawer and closed it gently. That night, he drew a picture of our condo. 2 figures, one tall, one small, standing by the window. He labeled it, "Me and Grandma's house." No monsters, no cages, just a moon and stars and 2 stick people smiling. I cried in the bathroom for 10 full minutes. A week later, I called a real estate agent. Not for selling, for buying. Somewhere warmer, quieter. Arizona, maybe. I'd always wanted to see those red rocks. Kristen said the custody case would travel with me, that I'd still have to check in, meet requirements, go slow. I said fine. Because I'm done apologizing. I gave 30 years to a daughter who stopped seeing me as a person. I won't give 30 more. Not when there's still time for new things. Even at 72. Especially at 72. Jamie stood beside me as we signed the paperwork. He wore a little clip-on tie I'd found in a thrift store, And when the clerk handed me the pen, he whispered, "Can we paint my room blue?" "We can do whatever we want now," I said. And I meant it.